Welcome to Life Story 999. Today's story takes us into the life of a wealthy businessman who hires a woman to pretend to be his fiancée. However, he soon discovers she holds secrets that will shake his world. Join us to uncover how an arrangement meant to impress soon unravels into a tale of honesty, humility, and life-changing revelations. If you're intrigued, don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more incredible stories like this. Meet Dominic Martinez, a successful businessman whose name is synonymous with luxury and power. At 37, Dominic is the embodiment of financial triumph, a man who carved out an empire with sheer determination and relentless ambition. He owns a chain of high-end hotels, restaurants, and even a prestigious line of clothing, making him one of the most sought-after bachelors in the country. Living in a penthouse in the heart of the bustling city, Dominic enjoys every comfort money can buy. From gourmet meals prepared by a private chef to world-class views of the skyline that sparkle through his floor-to-ceiling windows. Despite all this, one thing remains constant in his life: his devotion to his work. Dominic had always been clear about his priorities. Love, romance, and anything resembling emotional attachment were secondary to the growth of his businesses. He spent his evenings attending high-profile events, networking with influential people, and ensuring his brand was always at the top of its game. Relationships were nothing more than distractions, and Dominic avoided them with the same precision he used to manage his stock portfolios. He prided himself on keeping emotions out of the equation. His heart was closed off to anything that wasn't a spreadsheet or a business plan. However, Dominic's carefully curated world faced an unexpected challenge when he received a call from his assistant Victor one Thursday afternoon. Alejandro Ramirez, a prominent foreign investor, was interested in collaborating with Dominic's hotel chain, a deal that could catapult Dominic's empire to an international level. Alejandro was known for his unorthodox methods and old-fashioned sensibilities. He believed in the importance of family, tradition, and the presence of a strong partner by one's side, values that Dominic had always dismissed as trivial. Alejandro had requested a meeting with Dominic to discuss the partnership further, but there was one catch. He wanted to meet Dominic's fiancée. The word echoed in Dominic's head, each syllable feeling heavier than the last. Fiancée, Dominic repeated to Victor, his voice tinged with disbelief. Alejandro wanted to ensure he was partnering with a man who was stable not only in business, but also in his personal life. For him, this was a marker of reliability. Someone with deep roots, a family, and therefore someone who understood long-term commitment. Dominic paced back and forth in his office, the panoramic view of the city behind him doing little to calm his growing frustration. This was a scenario he hadn't anticipated, and for a man who thrived on being 10 steps ahead, that was saying something. Victor stood nearby, watching his boss with a concerned expression. Dominic, we can't afford to lose this deal. Alejandro's investment could be the gateway to expanding into the South American market, Victor said cautiously, knowing how volatile Dominic's moods could be when he felt cornered. Dominic ran a hand through his meticulously styled dark hair, his mind racing through possibilities. The idea of a fiancée was laughable. He couldn't remember the last time he'd even considered a serious relationship. Women came and went, usually leaving after realizing that they would always be a distant second to his business interests. He didn't have time for attachments, let alone a fiancée. Yet, here he was, needing to produce one on short notice. All right, Dominic finally said, his voice decisive. We'll do it, but it's going to be an act, a complete charade. He looked at Victor with a determined gleam in his eyes. Find someone who can pull this off. We need someone who looks the part, someone smart, elegant, and who won't ask too many questions. And we need her quickly. Alejandro will be in town by Saturday. Victor nodded, relieved to see Dominic regaining his composure. He pulled out his phone, already making a list of potential candidates. I'll handle it, Dominic. You just focus on the business end of things. Dominic watched as Victor left the office, and he sank into his leather chair, a sense of unease washing over him. This was a gamble, and Dominic hated gambling when he wasn't sure of the outcome. The entire situation was uncharted territory for him. He could control financial markets, predict economic trends, and negotiate mergers worth millions. But convincing Alejandro that he was a family man, grounded and reliable, that was an entirely different game. He sighed, leaning back, staring at the ceiling. It was ironic, really. For years, people had been telling him to settle down, to find someone who could share his life, and he had always brushed it off. And now, he was scrambling to manufacture a relationship out of thin air, all because an investor wanted proof that he could be stable outside of his business dealings. It felt absurd, but Dominic couldn't afford to lose the opportunity. His drive for success had never wavered before, and he wasn't about to let it falter now. The next morning, Victor returned with a list of candidates. Women who were polished, presentable, and willing to play the part for the right price. As Victor listed their qualifications, Dominic barely listened. All he wanted was someone who could do the job without complicating his life further. His eyes scanned the list until one name caught his attention. Sofia Reyes. According to Victor, she was a librarian, intelligent, well-spoken, and in need of some quick cash. She doesn't have any connections to the corporate world, Victor added, which means she won't be nosy or ask too many questions. She's perfect for what we need. Dominic nodded. Set up a meeting, he instructed, his voice firm. Let's see if she's the right fit. By Saturday evening, Dominic found himself waiting in the private lounge of an upscale restaurant, nervously checking his watch. This was it, the beginning of his charade. He wasn't sure how convincing he could be, or if Sophia was even capable of playing along with his plan. But as she walked into the room, her presence commanding yet understated, Dominic felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could pull this off. Little did Dominic know, this arrangement would turn out to be far more complicated than he had anticipated. Sophia's role as his fiancée would soon blur the lines between fiction and reality, challenging everything he thought he knew about control, relationships, and the true meaning of stability. Dominic sat at his desk, drumming his fingers on the polished wood surface as Victor began introducing the potential candidates. He had arranged for several women to come by the office for interviews, women who were polished, confident, and looked the part of a high-profile businessman's fiancée. Dominic barely glanced at them as they came in, one after another. Despite their expensive dresses and carefully practiced smiles, none of them seemed right. Something was always off, too superficial, too rehearsed, or just lacking the spark Dominic needed to make the charade work. Victor's voice broke into his thoughts, his tone hesitant. There is one more candidate, sir. I almost didn't bring her up because she's a little different from the others, but I think she might be worth considering. He paused, glancing at Dominic to gauge his reaction. Dominic raised an eyebrow, signaling for Victor to continue. Her name is Lily Torres, Victor said. She's not as polished as the others, but she has a certain authenticity. She's intelligent, confident in a quiet way, and, well, she's different. I think you might like her. Dominic leaned back in his chair, intrigued. Different? That was not the word he had expected to hear. He sighed, rubbing his temple. Fine. Let's meet her, he said, curiosity piqued by Victor's description. He wasn't sure what he was expecting, but as he waited in his office for the next interview, he found himself hoping that this Lily Torres might be the answer to his problem. A few moments later, the door opened and Lily walked in. She was not like the others. Her demeanor was calm, almost understated, and there was a natural grace to her movements. Her dark hair was pulled back loosely, and her attire, while simple, was elegant. She looked Dominic in the eyes, her gaze steady, unflinching. Dominic was used to people fawning over him, trying to impress him, but there was none of that in Lily's expression. She was composed, her confidence quiet yet unmistakable. Victor introduced them, and Dominic nodded, gesturing for Lily to sit. He began asking her questions, gauging her reactions, watching her closely. She answered with clarity and poise, and there was something about the way she spoke that caught Dominic's attention. She was genuine. There were no pretenses, no attempts to be someone she wasn't, and that was exactly what he needed. Alejandro would see through anything too polished, too fake. Dominic needed someone who could play the role convincingly, someone who was naturally poised and unafraid to be herself. After a few more questions, Dominic leaned back, glancing at Victor, who gave a subtle nod. Dominic turned his attention back to Lily, studying her for a moment longer. "Lily, what I'm about to ask of you is unusual," he began. "I need someone to pretend to be my fiancée for a business arrangement. It will be for a short period, and you'll be compensated handsomely. It requires discretion and the ability to handle high-pressure situations. Do you think you can do that?" Lily didn't flinch. She took a deep breath, her eyes meeting Dominic steadily. "I understand," she replied, her voice calm. "I can do it." Dominic nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. There was something about her that made him believe this might actually work. "Good," he said, standing up and extending his hand. "We have a deal, then. Victor will fill you in on the details." Lily stood, shaking his hand with a firm grip. "I look forward to working with you, Mr. Martinez," she said with a small smile, and for the first time in days, Dominic felt the tension in his shoulders ease just a little. The next day, Lily arrived at Dominic's office to finalize the details of their arrangement. Victor handed her a list of expectations: what to wear, how to behave, and the specifics of their backstory. Dominic watched her as she read over the document, her expression focused, her brows slightly furrowed. She didn't complain, didn't question the terms. Instead, she simply nodded, asking a few clarifying questions before agreeing to everything. Dominic couldn't help but admire her composure. She was different indeed. There was an authenticity to her that set her apart from the other candidates, and it was exactly what he needed to make this plan work. She was someone who could be believable, who could fit into his world without seeming forced. And perhaps most importantly, she wasn't intimidated by him or his wealth. By the time the arrangements were made, Dominic felt more confident than he had since this whole fiancé charade had started. He watched as Lily left the office, her stride steady, her head held high. There was no doubt in his mind that she was the right choice. She was the perfect blend of confident and composed, genuine and unpretentious. He just hoped that Alejandro would see it the same way. On Saturday evening, Dominic found himself waiting in the private lounge of the upscale restaurant where they were to meet Alejandro. He adjusted his cufflinks, glancing at his reflection in the polished surface of the bar. He had done everything he could to prepare Lily for this meeting, but a part of him still felt uneasy. This wasn't a business deal where he could control every outcome. It was a gamble, and he hated not knowing if they would succeed. Just as he was about to check his watch for the 5th time, the door to the lounge opened and Lily walked in. She wore a simple yet elegant dress, her hair falling in loose waves around her shoulders. She looked every bit the part of a successful businessman's fiancée, and as she approached him, Dominic felt a sense of pride. Pride that he had made the right choice, pride in the woman standing beside him. "You look perfect," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Lily smiled, a quiet confidence radiating from her. "Thank you, Dominic," she replied, her tone calm and composed. And in that moment, Dominic knew that whatever happened next, they were as ready as they could be. Little did Dominic know, this arrangement would lead to something far more complex and meaningful than he ever imagined. An unexpected journey that would blur the lines between business and real emotion, challenging everything he thought he knew about relationships, trust, and himself. The soft hum of conversations and clinking silverware filled the upscale restaurant as Dominic and Lily sat across from Alejandro Ramirez, the investor whose favor they had come to win. Alejandro, a silver-haired man with a warm smile, was charming and full of anecdotes, filling the table with laughter. Lily, dressed in a sophisticated yet understated gown, played her part flawlessly. Her genuine warmth and intelligence added a spark to their conversation that Dominic hadn't anticipated. As the dinner progressed, Dominic couldn't help but notice how effortlessly Lily fit into the scene. She had an uncanny ability to balance grace with confidence, her words poised and thoughtful. She listened attentively as Alejandro spoke, occasionally interjecting with insightful comments that visibly impressed him. Dominic watched as Alejandro's eyes lit up each time Lily responded, her unexpected withdrawing a smile from the usually serious businessman. Alejandro leaned back, a satisfied look on his face. "You know, Dominic," he said, swirling the wine in his glass, "you're a very lucky man. A partner who is not only beautiful but also wise beyond her years. It's rare to find such a combination." Dominic smiled, glancing at Lily. He was about to respond with a rehearsed line about how fortunate he was when Lily spoke up, her voice soft but steady. "Thank you, Mr. Ramirez," she said, her eyes meeting Alejandro's. "Life has a way of teaching you lessons that books and lectures cannot." There was a flicker of something in her eyes, an emotion that Dominic couldn't quite place, something deeper than the charming facade she had put on. Alejandro nodded, intrigued. "And what lessons have you learned, Miss Torres?" he asked, leaning forward slightly, his interest clearly piqued. Lily paused, her gaze lowering to the glass of water in front of her. There was a moment of silence, a pause that seemed to stretch longer than it should have. Dominic watched her, unsure of what she would say. He had briefed her on what to share, what to withhold, but there was something about her expression that told him she was about to veer off script. "Well," she began, her voice tinged with a trace of vulnerability, "I've learned that sometimes life takes away what you hold most dear. And when that happens, you have to find the strength to rebuild." She looked up, her eyes locking with Alejandro's, a quiet intensity in her gaze. "You learn that stability is something you have to create for yourself, even when the world around you is falling apart." The air around the table shifted, the light-hearted tone of the evening giving way to something more serious. Alejandro nodded thoughtfully, clearly touched by her words. Dominic, however, felt a growing unease. He knew Lily had a past, one that had given her a depth most people lacked, but he hadn't expected her to bring any of it into this dinner. He opened his mouth to steer the conversation back to safer territory when Alejandro spoke again. "That's very true," Alejandro said, his voice soft. "And I admire that perspective. Life can be incredibly challenging, but it's resilience that defines us, isn't it?" Lily smiled, but there was something distant in her eyes. Dominic watched her, a question forming in his mind, but he couldn't ask it. "Not here. Not now." Alejandro leaned forward, his tone more relaxed now. "Speaking of resilience, Dominic, I must say, your recent development projects are quite ambitious. I've heard a lot about the new hotel being built downtown. It's impressive, though I heard there were some challenges acquiring the land." He chuckled, unaware of the tension his words would create. Dominic nodded, his expression controlled. "Yes, it was a challenging project, but we managed to work through the obstacles," he said smoothly. He had anticipated this topic might come up and was prepared to provide a diplomatic response. But beside him, Lily stiffened. Her demeanor shifted, and Dominic saw her eyes narrow, a flash of something, pain, maybe even anger, crossing her face. She took a breath, setting her glass down carefully before speaking. "Actually," Lily said, her voice steady but her tone colder than it had been all evening, "that project affected a lot of people. Not all of them were happy about it." She turned her gaze to Dominic, her eyes locking with his. There was a challenge in her stare, a question she was silently demanding him to answer. Dominic felt his stomach drop. He had never seen her like this. The warmth, the calm composure, all of it was gone, replaced by a steeliness that took him by surprise. He forced a smile, trying to keep his voice even. "Every development has its challenges, but we did what was necessary for the growth of the city," he said, though the words felt hollow even to him. Alejandro, sensing the tension but not fully understanding its depth, nodded slowly. "Indeed, Progress always comes with sacrifices, he said, his tone diplomatic. Lily didn't look away from Dominic. My family lived in that neighborhood, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, yet it cut through the room like a knife. We lost our home because of that project. For a moment, silence enveloped the table. Dominic's heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing. He hadn't known. He hadn't even thought to ask. To him, it had just been another piece of land, another step towards expanding his empire. He had never stopped to think about the people it might affect, their lives, their stories. And now, sitting across from Lily, seeing the pain in her eyes, he realized just how blind he had been. Alejandro looked between them, his expression a mix of confusion and concern. I didn't realize, he said, glancing at Dominic. Is that true? Dominic swallowed, struggling to find his voice. I didn't know, he said, his words sounding weak, even to his own ears. He looked at Lily, his eyes pleading for understanding, but her gaze remained hard, unforgiving. Of course you didn't, Lily said, her tone icy. She turned back to Alejandro, her composure returning, though the warmth from earlier was gone. It's in the past now. We move on, don't we? Alejandro nodded slowly, clearly unsure of how to proceed. Yes, of course, he said, his voice gentle. But still, I'm truly sorry to hear that. Dominic felt a heaviness settle over him, a weight that pressed down on his chest. He had always prided himself on being in control, on knowing every detail of his business. But here was a detail he had missed. A detail that mattered more than any profit margin or expansion plan. He had hurt people, real people, and one of them was sitting right beside him, pretending to be his fiancée. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. Alejandro, sensing the tension, steered the conversation to safer topics, and Dominic followed along, though his mind was elsewhere. He glanced at Lily several times, but she avoided his gaze, her face an unreadable mask. By the time the dinner ended, Dominic felt drained, the weight of the evening's revelations pressing heavily on him. As they stepped out of the restaurant, Dominic reached for Lily's arm, his voice soft. Lily, wait. I had no idea. She pulled away from him, her eyes meeting his, her expression filled with a mixture of hurt and disappointment. No, Dominic, you didn't. And that's the problem. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Dominic standing alone, the realization of his actions hitting him harder than he had ever imagined. For the first time in his life, Dominic Martinez, the man who always had a plan, found himself at a loss, unsure of how to move forward. Dominic spent a restless night, his mind replaying every word, every look exchanged during the dinner with Alejandro. Lily's revelation haunted him, and her words echoed in his mind, laced with disappointment and hurt. He had always considered himself an astute businessman, someone who was calculated but never cruel. And yet, he had unknowingly caused pain to someone who had now become an essential part of his life. It was this realization that left him feeling hollow, his success now shadowed by the cost of human lives affected by his relentless ambition. When the first light of dawn peeked through his penthouse windows, Dominic made up his mind. He couldn't let things end the way they had. He had to make amends. Not just for the deal, not just for the success that seemed to slip further away with every moment he spent ignoring the impact of his choices, but for Lily. She deserved an apology, a genuine one. She deserved to see that he was more than just a businessman driven by numbers and land acquisitions. Without hesitating, Dominic dressed quickly, his mind set on what he needed to do. He found Lily's address from the file Victor had given him before their arrangement began. It wasn't in the best part of town, a clear contrast to his own life of luxury. He drove there himself, ignoring the urge to call ahead or even send someone else in his place. This needed to be personal, something he had to face alone. The streets were quiet when Dominic arrived. He took a deep breath, steeling himself before knocking on the door of Lily's modest apartment. He could hear the faint sound of footsteps approaching, and then the door opened. Lily stood there, her expression shifting from surprise to guardedness. She looked tired, as though the previous night had drained her just as much as it had him. "Dominic?" she asked, her voice laced with both curiosity and wariness. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you, Lily," Dominic said, his tone softer than she had ever heard it. "Please, just give me a few minutes." Lily hesitated, her hand still on the door as she considered his request. Finally, she stepped aside, allowing him to enter. Dominic walked into her small living room, the space cozy but far from the luxury he was used to. He could see framed photos on a small table. Lily with her family, smiles that spoke of better times before everything changed. She gestured for him to sit, but Dominic remained standing. He looked at her, his expression sincere, and began. "Lily, I had no idea about your family, about your home. I know that doesn't excuse anything, but I need you to understand, I never wanted to hurt anyone." He paused, his voice catching slightly. "I'm sorry, Lily. Truly. And I want to make it right, whatever it takes." Lily watched him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face as though trying to find any sign of deception. But all she saw was a man stripped of his usual confidence, a man who, for once, seemed vulnerable. She sighed, her expression softening just slightly. "Dominic, it's not just about my family," she said. "It's about understanding that your actions have consequences. The decisions you make, they affect real people. I lost my home, but others lost even more. And you can't just throw money at a problem and expect it to disappear." Dominic nodded, her words cutting deep. He had always known on some level that his business decisions had an impact on people's lives, but he had never let himself truly think about it. He had always distanced himself from that reality. But now, seeing Lily's pain, hearing her story, it made everything real in a way it hadn't been before. "I know that," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I want to do better, Lily. I want to be better. And I want to help you. If you'll let me." Lily looked at him, her eyes softening further. She could see the sincerity in his expression, the regret that seemed to weigh heavily on him. Slowly, she nodded. "All right, Dominic, but this isn't something that can be fixed overnight. It's going to take time, and it's going to take real effort." Dominic felt a sense of relief wash over him. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was a start. He nodded, his eyes meeting hers with determination. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes," he said. From that day forward, Dominic made an effort to see Lily regularly, not just to prove himself, but because he genuinely wanted to. They started meeting for coffee, sharing stories about their past, both the good and the bad. Dominic learned about Lily's childhood, about the neighborhood she had grown up in, the community that had been lost because of his project. He listened as she spoke about her dreams, her ambitions, the life she had envisioned before everything had changed. And in return, Dominic opened up to her in a way he hadn't with anyone else. He told her about his own childhood, the pressure he had felt to succeed, the sacrifices he had made along the way. He spoke of his loneliness. How, despite all the success and wealth, there was always something missing, something that no amount of money or power could fill. Their conversations were honest, sometimes painfully so, but they brought them closer together. Slowly, the walls between them began to crumble, and Dominic found himself feeling something he hadn't expected, affection. Real, genuine affection for this woman who had challenged him, who had shown him the consequences of his actions, and who had inspired him to change. One afternoon, as they sat in a small cafe near Lily's apartment, Dominic looked at her, his heart swelling with emotions he hadn't felt in years. He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. Lily looked at him, her eyes widening slightly in surprise. "Lily," he began, his voice soft, "I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that I want you to be a part of it. Not because of some business arrangement, not because I need you to play a role, but because I care about you, More than I ever thought I could. Lily stared at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She could see the honesty in his eyes, the vulnerability that he had allowed her to see. Slowly, she squeezed his hand, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Dominic, I care about you too," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But this isn't going to be easy. There's a lot we both need to work through." Dominic nodded, a smile breaking across his face. "I know, but I'm willing to try. For you, for us." And in that moment, Lily knew that maybe, just maybe, there was hope for them. That despite the pain, despite the past, they could find a way to move forward together. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be worth it. As they left the cafe that day, walking side by side through the bustling streets, Dominic felt a sense of peace that he hadn't known in a long time. He knew that the road ahead would be challenging, that redemption was not something easily earned. But with Lily by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next, determined to become the man she deserved. A man who understood the true value of compassion, empathy, and love. Dominic and Lily continued to spend time together, their meetings no longer bound by any business arrangement, but by a genuine desire to be near each other. Each moment spent together felt like a step closer to something meaningful, something neither of them had anticipated when they first met. As the days turned into weeks, Dominic realized that Lily had become an integral part of his life, and the thought of her not being there was simply unbearable. One quiet evening, they sat in Dominic's living room, a comfortable silence settling between them. The city lights twinkled through the large windows, casting a soft glow across the room. Dominic looked over at Lily, who was curled up on the couch, her eyes focused on a book. He felt a warmth spread through his chest, a feeling that had grown steadily stronger since the day he had come to her apartment to apologize. It was time, he thought, to put all pretense aside. "Lily," Dominic said, his voice breaking the silence. She looked up, her eyes meeting his, a questioning look in them. He hesitated for a moment, gathering his thoughts before speaking again. "I need to tell you something." Lily set her book down, giving him her full attention. "What is it, Dominic?" He took a deep breath, his heart pounding. "I want us to be real. No more pretending, no more arrangements. I want you in my life, not as part of a deal, but as someone I genuinely care about. I want to build something with you, something that's ours." His voice softened, and he leaned forward slightly. "I've never felt this way before, Lily, and I know it won't be easy, but I'm willing to try. For us." For a moment, there was only silence, the weight of Dominic's words hanging in the air. Lily stared at him, her eyes widening slightly in surprise. She hadn't expected this, not tonight, not so soon. But as she looked into his eyes, she saw nothing but honesty. He was vulnerable, stripped of the bravado that usually defined him, and she could see how much this meant to him. Slowly, a smile spread across Lily's face, her eyes softening. She reached out, taking Dominic's hand in hers. "Dominic," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I care about you too, more than I ever thought I would. And I want this, I really do. But like you said, it won't be easy. There's a lot we need to work through. Together." Dominic felt a wave of relief wash over him, his heart swelling with emotion. He squeezed her hand gently, a smile breaking across his face. "I know, but I'm ready to face whatever comes our way, as long as I have you by my side." Lily nodded, her smile growing. "Then let's do it," she said softly. "Let's start over, for real this time. No more pretending, just us." That night marked the beginning of something new for both of them. They decided to officially date, leaving behind the facade that had initially brought them together. Their relationship became about more than just making amends or fulfilling obligations. It became about love, trust, and the hope of building a future together. They spent more time getting to know each other, not as business partners in an arrangement, but as two people who had found something special in each other. Their connection deepened as they shared their dreams, their fears, and their hopes for the future. Dominic found himself opening up to Lily in ways he never had with anyone else, and in return, she shared her own aspirations, dreams that had once seemed out of reach but now felt possible with Dominic by her side. They laughed together, they argued, they comforted each other when the weight of their past threatened to overwhelm them. And through it all, they grew closer, their bond becoming stronger with each passing day. One evening, as they sat on a park bench watching the sun set over the city, Dominic turned to Lily, his eyes filled with emotion. "You know," he said, his voice soft, "I never thought I'd find someone like you. Someone who could make me see the world differently, who could make me want to be better." Lily looked at him, her heart swelling with affection. "You've already changed, Dominic," she said, her voice filled with warmth. "You're not the same man you were when we first met, and I'm proud of you." Dominic smiled, his eyes glistening. He reached out, wrapping his arm around her shoulders and pulling her close. "Thank you, Lily, for everything, for giving me a second chance." She leaned her head against his shoulder, a contented sigh escaping her lips. "We're in this together," she said softly, "and that's all that matters." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Dominic and Lily sat together, knowing that this was only the beginning of their journey. It wouldn't be perfect, and there would be challenges ahead, but they were ready to face them together, and that, they both knew, was worth everything. In the end, Dominic Martinez learned a powerful lesson, one that transcended wealth, business deals, or the influence he once believed defined him. Through his journey with Lily, Dominic discovered the importance of truly understanding the impact of his actions on those around him. He realized that success was not just about building an empire or expanding his influence, but about the lives that his actions touched both positively and negatively. It was this realization that set him on a new path, one that was guided by compassion, empathy, and a desire to do better. Lily had been the catalyst for this transformation. Her honesty and willingness to challenge Dominic, to hold up a mirror to his actions, had been both painful and necessary. She had forced him to see what he had been ignoring for far too long, the human cost of his ambition. For Dominic, who had always prided himself on being in control, this loss of certainty was unsettling, but it was also liberating. He no longer felt the need to be perfect, to be untouchable. Instead, he embraced the vulnerability that came with being honest, with admitting his mistakes, and with striving to make amends. What began as a business arrangement between Dominic and Lily turned into something far more meaningful, a relationship built on trust, understanding, and a shared desire to grow together. Dominic's initial desire to redeem himself in Lily's eyes evolved into a genuine love that had nothing to do with guilt or obligation. He wanted to be better not just for her, but for himself, and for the people whose lives he had affected in his pursuit of success. The more time he spent with Lily, the more he understood that the true value of life lay in the connections we build with others, the kindness we show, and the positive impact we leave behind. Lily, too, had found something she hadn't expected. When she first agreed to Dominic's proposition, she had been skeptical, wary of his intentions, and doubtful that anything meaningful could come from it. But as she got to know the real Dominic, the man behind the corporate facade, she saw the potential for change. She saw a man who, despite his flaws, was willing to confront his mistakes, to learn and to grow. And that was enough for her. It was enough to give him a second chance, to believe that he could become the man she had glimpsed beneath the surface. Together, they forged a new beginning, one that was not without its challenges, but one that was real and honest. Dominic worked to make amends for his past actions, reaching out to the communities he had once overlooked, investing not just money but time and effort to rebuild what had been lost. It wasn't easy, and there were days when the weight of his past mistakes felt overwhelming. But with Lily by his side, he found the strength to keep going, to keep striving to be better. Their story is a reminder of the transformative power of humility and empathy. It shows that redemption is not about erasing the past, but about acknowledging it, learning from it, and using that knowledge to make a positive difference. Dominic's journey from a man consumed by ambition to someone who valued genuine relationships over superficial success is a testament to the power of love and understanding. It's a testament to the fact that change is possible, even for those who have spent years running from it. For Lily, the journey was about finding hope and believing in the possibility of change. It was about recognizing that even those who have made mistakes are capable of growth, and that sometimes offering someone a second chance can lead to something beautiful. Together, she and Dominic built a life that was far from perfect, but was filled with love, laughter, and the promise of a better future. As Dominic and Lily walked hand in hand into that future, they knew that there would be challenges ahead, times when the past would resurface, when doubts and fears would creep in. But they also knew that they had each other, and that was enough. They had chosen to face the world together, to build something meaningful from the ashes of their past mistakes, and to never stop striving to be better, both for themselves and for each other. Their story serves as a powerful reminder that no matter how far we may have strayed from the person we want to be, it is never too late to change course. It is never too late to choose compassion over ambition, to value the people in our lives over the accolades we seek, and to strive for a life that is rich not in wealth, but in love and connection. And in the end, that is the greatest success any of us can hope to achieve. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, leave your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories like this. Let's spread the message of empathy, forgiveness, and the power of second chances. Thank you for watching, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you for joining us on Life Story 999. We hope you found this story both heartwarming and inspiring. If you enjoyed it, please like the video, leave your comments, and subscribe to our channel for more uplifting stories. May this story remind us all of the power of kindness and understanding in every part of life.